have no right to feel this way. My parents provided for me everything I needed. I was never hit. I was never neglected. I was loved. Do these statements sound familiar? So many people come to me carrying a heavy burden of anxiety, perfectionism, or a deep sense of emptiness. And the first thing they do is to apologize for it. They feel like they are broken because they can't point to a single explosive event that justifies their pain. But here's the truth or something about trauma. Trauma isn't just about what happened, it is often about what didn't happen. And you can have a roof over your head, food on the table, two parents in the home, and still experience the kind of emotional injury that shapes your adult life. Today, we are going to talk about the trauma of the good childhood and why your pain doesn't need to be a horror story for it to be valid. We are going to start by dismantling a huge misconception, the idea that trauma must be loud. In the clinical world, we often distinguish between big T, which are things like abuse, accidents, natural disasters, and small t. Small t is the chronic, quiet, repetitive lack of emotional attunement. For example, if you grew up in a home whereby your physical needs were met, but your emotional world was ignored, you experience something we call childhood emotional neglect. This is the ultimate invisible trauma because there are no bruises to show and no specific bad memories to point to. You often think, if my life was so good, then why do I feel so empty? The answer is that a good childhood without emotional depth is like a house with a beautiful exterior but no insulation. It looks fine from the street, but it is freezing on the inside. Often in these good childhoods, the parents were what we call well meaning but emotionally immature. They might have been, number one, the provider parent. This is a parent who had three jobs, made sure you attended the best schools, but they never had a real conversation with you about feelings or basically about anything in life. Number two, the fixer parent. This is a parent who bought you a toy anytime you were sad instead of sitting with you in your sadness. And number three is the fragile parent. Now, this is the parent who was so stressed or so overwhelmed that you subconsciously learned how to hide your problems so that you don't become an extra burden. In these scenarios, you learned a very dangerous lesson that my needs or my feelings are an inconvenience. So, to keep the peace in your good home, you had to suppress your true self. Now, that suppression is a form of trauma because it rewires your nervous system to believe that being easy is the only way to be loved. Another way good childhoods cause trauma is through enmeshment or high achievement. If your parents' sense of worth was tied to your good grades, your sports performance, or your good behavior, then you didn't have a childhood. You had a job. Unfortunately, you weren't loved for who you were, but for how you performed. And this creates a performance based identity. As an adult, it looks like chronic burnout, severe perfectionism, or an inability to relax. You are constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop because your safety was conditional on your success. Even though your parents were supportive, that support felt like a weight you had to carry. So, how do you know if your good childhood left a mark? So, look for these three symptoms. Number one, alexithymia. This is a fancy word for not knowing how you feel. When someone asks you, how are you? You literally don't know the answer. You feel numb or either just fine. Number two is the imposter feelings. Even when you succeed, you still feel like a fraud. This is because you were taught to value the mask that you wore for your parents more than your actual self. And the last one is self gaslighting. This is the big one. When you feel sad or angry, there's a voice in your head that tells you, stop complaining. Others had it way worse than you. This is the voice of your good childhood still telling you that your emotions don't matter. A huge barrier to healing is the fear of being disloyal to your parents. You can love your parents and still acknowledge that they did not have the emotional tools to meet your needs. So, how do you heal without blaming them? Number one, validate the absence. Start by acknowledging the missing pieces. You can say, my parents loved me and they were unable to handle my emotions. Both can be true because two things can coexist at the same time. Number two, stop the comparison. Trauma is not a competition. Your nervous system doesn't care that somebody else had it worse. It only knows that it didn't feel seen. And the last one is learn to internalize safety. Start practicing the emotional attunement you did not get. When you feel overwhelmed or when you feel sad, learn to sit in the discomfort of your emotions without running away or distracting. This expands your window of tolerance. Also, because emotions are passing clouds when you allow yourself to feel them. I don't know who needs to hear this, but your story doesn't need to be tragic for it to be significant.